You don't have to do this, but I spent hundreds of dollars and thousands of hours reading every lucid dreaming book I could get my hands on. And it's not necessary to read that much in order to become lucid, but I tell you what, on the way I have found some fascinating facts and techniques and ideas, and so I'm going to share with you the top takeaway from my top 3 books. Plus, when I was going through all this, I found and rediscovered the technique I used when I was first training that saved my life. So I'll teach you that at the end of this video too. From these, my top 3 books, we're going to dig into the neuroscience of why you can't read in the dream, what to do with nightmares, and the interesting relationship between dreaming and dying. Let's start with the first book, Dreams of Awakening by Charlie Morley. And I actually went on to train with Charlie Morley, and he's the real deal. And what I love about all of his work is that he really blends sort of modern psychology and neuroscience with the context of Tibetan Buddhist dream yoga. He's a Buddhist, and Lama Yeshe Rinpoche authorized him to teach in the Kagyu lineage. So it's kind of a really interesting fusion. And I'm sure you've had that experience in a dream where you're trying to read something, but the text doesn't make any sense, or you're trying to text somebody, but the phone just won't work. And there's a reason why our brains, when they're in a sort of non-lucid state, can't process these things. And that's what he describes really well in this book. He explains it like this. Dreaming is mainly a right brain activity. The logical left brain is almost entirely offline when we dream. But when it comes to detailed information processing, like fluent reading, recognition of complex symbols, and identifying detailed patterns, we rely almost solely on the superior processing speed of our left brain. So, the left brain contains the program for how to read and how to recreate detailed patterns. But because it's almost entirely offline while we dream, if we try to process detailed patterns, we'll be stumped. Working on this basis, we can see why reality checks that involve fluent reading, recreating detailed patterns, are especially difficult in the dream state. So it's so interesting, right? So this part of our brain that we use during the waking state that allows us to process complex symbols, letters, words, numbers, that's pretty much having nap time while you're in REM. This is actually super helpful for us as lucid dreamers, because knowing that the brain in a non-lucid state can't process that information well, we can build our reality checks around that. One of the things you can do to check if you're in a dream and you're not sure is to look at a piece of text, look away and look back, and if it changes, you know that you're probably in a dream. So I would use it with our hands too. Our hands are incredibly detailed and intricate. If you put your hands up, flip them over, flip them back, and do that reality check, it's very hard for your brain to replicate that degree of detail. And now you know why. That's just a fun fact from Charlie's book, but I really recommend Dreams of Awakening, especially if you're curious, learning a little bit more about the Tibetan Buddhist sort of context of lucid dreaming. The second book is The Complete Book of Lucid Dreaming by Clare Johnson. This is the ultimate encyclopedia when it comes to lucid dreaming. The amount of knowledge in here, the techniques, the practical wisdom, the advice and guidance, it's honestly invaluable for anyone on the lucid dreaming journey. So if you haven't checked this out, highly recommend it. One of the things I love about this book is she dedicates an entire chapter to how to use nightmares as opportunities. Listen, we've all had nightmares. We know how real and terrifying they can be, and it's often what puts people off doing a lucid dream practice. What's in here is an incredible practical guide of how to work with your nightmares. Now, I can't take you through all of it, but what I found especially useful was what she invented called the Lucid Imaging Nightmare Solution, LINS. And this is a technique that she encourages to use if you wake up from a nightmare and you want the opportunity to kind of rewrite that and go back into the dream. And so the first thing she says to do is to attend. So if you've woken up from a nightmare, just take care of yourself. Sometimes we wake up beating heart, sweaty. So she's like, make yourself comfortable, kind of rehabilitate yourself so you're no longer in this state of fear. And then the second thing she says is to re-enter the nightmare. So kind of go back in your memory and sort of try to remember as much detail as you can. Like, where did it start? What's happening? And then the third thing is to identify the tipping point. Most of our nightmares actually start off just as normal dreams, and then something builds and escalates, and then, So she says, find that tipping point where it kind of became very much a nightmare. And once you've got this tipping point, you can move on to step number 4, which is to re-script the ending and resolve it. So imagining that you're kind of like the director of your dream. Rather than letting it run off and become a nightmare, you take the chance to resolve it. And maybe, you turn to the dream figure and ask, why are you chasing me? or you have it play out a different way. Either way, it takes away from a nightmarish quality and brings it into resolution. And the last step is once you're happy with whatever you've come up with as the alternative ending, to then program yourself to get lucid and to go back into the dreamscape and to play that out. Now the cool thing is, I've tried this many times, even if you don't end up going back into that dream or getting lucid, just that act of re-scripting somehow changes it. And I've always found that I've gone into positive dreams even after a really bad nightmare. And of course, if you do get lucid, it's an amazing opportunity to use the resolution you prepared. So it's a wonderful way to work with your nightmares. And book number 3 is one of my favorites of all time. This is Living, Dreaming, Dying by Rob Nairn. And Rob is an incredible Buddhist and lucid dreaming teacher. And this book goes way beyond just your normal lucid dreaming stuff. It's really a deep dive into what the Tibetan Buddhists who, they practice lucid dreaming for thousands of years, but the way that they constructed and understood the way the waking realm, the dream realm, and the death realm all interacted with each other. I think what really blows my mind from this book is thinking about how each night when we dream, we are essentially experiencing a mini death. It's like practice for when we die. And he talks in this book about how do we learn to live skillfully, but also how to die skillfully. And in the Tibetan context, in their cosmology, they believe that, if you train in the dream realm to recognize the dream, then when you die, you'll have an opportunity to recognize that you've died and become enlightened. So it's high stakes for them. But even if that's not something you believe in, what really blew me away was seeing that connection between the waking realm and the dream realm. How the practices we do every day, whether that's meditation, metacognitive training, mindfulness, they strengthen the metacognitive awareness that gets us lucid. And then what we do in our lucid dreams, how we practice, if we do psychological integration or we do our spiritual practices in the dream, that strengthens the quality of our lucidity and awakeness in the waking realm. Just the incredible overlap between these spaces, because our consciousness is the through line, and this book maps it out beautifully. So if that's ever piqued your interest, this is the one to go for. And as I said, when I was rummaging around in these books, I rediscovered a practice that really saved my ass over and over again when I was lucid dreaming training. And it's from Charlie's book, and it's called the 4-7-8 breath. It's a breathing technique, you say, why? Well, you'll already know this if you're doing your training, but often when you're practicing lucid dreaming, you'll do techniques like wake back to bed or try falling asleep conscious. And if we don't nail them the first time, sometimes we can struggle to fall back to sleep. And the 4-7-8 breath is essentially like a breathing technique tranquilizer. It will just put you back to sleep. And there were so many mornings before I learned this technique where I got up but I mistimed it. It's like lying in bed. And so I'm going to teach this to you very quickly. It's super simple. You're going to breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, and then breathe out for 8 seconds. And you'll just repeat that breathing cycle. And it does an incredible job of just relaxing the body and putting you back into a sleepy, receptive state. So while you're training, if you ever get stuck, do that, the 4-7-8 breath. It is going to save you. You're welcome. And P.S., you can learn more about the neuroscience of lucid dreaming in this video here, where I break down the top studies on what the brain is doing when you get lucid.